How many assumptions do you make every day?
Your colleague completes his portion of the assignment late. He's lazy. Then you find out that his daughter was seriously ill. Your best friend isn't returning your messages or answering your calls. She's rude and a horrible friend. Later you realize she had an overwhelming project to complete that took every minute of her time and focus.
These types of assumptions are common, but they are not harmless. They can impact how we interact with others, and also by consequence how others interact with us. You'd be surprised how many times every day we are challenged by the principle we're discussing in this session.
This is the principle of Husn al-Dhan and Dhan in Islam. By the end of this module, you will be able to differentiate between Husn al-Dhan and Dhan, to recognize the disadvantages and advantages of adhering to this principle, and to exercise steps to interrupt Dhan and maximize Husn al-Dhan. Husn al-Dhan and Dhan are Arabic words. Do you notice any similarity between these two words? That's correct. The suffix al-Dhan on each word is the same. Al-Dhan means thinking or thoughts. Husn means good. Su' means bad or poor. So Husn al-Dhan means having good thoughts about others. And Su' al-Dhan is its opposite, having bad or poor thoughts about others. This is like giving the benefit of the doubt versus making assumptions or jumping to conclusions.
Islam teaches us to always give people the benefit of the doubt. This is the expectation, although not everyone adheres to it. This means if a fellow Muslim or anyone we interact with says or does something, and it can be interpreted positively or negatively, we should always suppose that they meant well, and they were trying to be good and not bad. A lot of times we dislike people or stop talking to them only because of something they did or said, and we assume they meant harm. But in fact, it is only a suspicion, and we have no proof, and we just jump to that conclusion.
In the Quran, Surah 49, verse 12, Allah says, "O you who have faith, avoid making too many assumptions. Indeed, some assumptions are sinful. And do not spy on one another or speak ill of people behind their backs."
Blake McKimmie, a professor of the X-Series program in Introduction to Developmental, Social, and Clinical Psychology at the University of Queensland, explains the perpetuating power of false assumptions.
I'm sure you can think of somebody who you think is arrogant. If you decide that this person thinks they're better than you, no matter what the actual behaviour of that person, you're likely to still perceive this person as arrogant. There's nothing a person can do to disprove it, because anything can be seen as a sign of arrogance. Every time they fold their arms when they're talking to you, or they lose eye contact with you, you will think that they're arrogant, as you're seeing them through that lens. Now, you might be right, you may be wrong, but it's a psychological thing where you start to see evidence for your theory. You start to see evidence for your assumption. Constantly, you feel as though you're getting a kernel of truth.
Can you see how misleading our tendency to Su' al-Dhan is? You automatically look for evidence to validate your assumption and reinforce your false belief that it is true. Do you see how dangerous this can be to our interpersonal relationships, professional or in general? Whereas if we take the opposite perspective and engage in Husn Dhan, or thinking the best of others, we can actually have a positive impact on our relationships with and the behaviors of those around us. Let's hear from Professor McKimmie again.
Self-fulfilling prophecies refer to times when our expectations of a person changes the way we interact with them, which then changes their behaviour in line with our expectations. In 1966, Rosenthal and Jacobson were interested in examining the effects of teacher expectancy on how students performed in the classroom. Rosenthal and Jacobson administered an IQ test to students from the 1st grade to the 6th grade, but called the test the Harvard Test of Inflected Acquisition. They then gave the teachers the results and indicated that 20% of their students were super smart. They told the teachers that these super smart students would show an incredible amount of intellectual development in the next year. Rosenthal and Jacobson called these children the bloomers. They gave each of the teachers the names of these students. However, what the teachers didn't know was that the students who identified as bloomers were actually selected at random. After the initial IQ test, the scores from the bloomers did not differ from those of the other students in the class. Rosenthal and Jacobson retested the same students 8 months later with the same IQ test. The students who were labelled as bloomers scored approximately 4 IQ points higher than the rest of the students in the class. Those students, despite being randomly selected, were suddenly the smarter students. So expectations had become reality. Rosenthal and Jacobson then tested these same students again 1 year after the initial retest of their IQ, and found that the students who were randomly allocated as bloomers gained more IQ points than the other students. A number of studies have since replicated this effect.
Look how powerful a change in perception was in this instance. Students reacted to the positive perceptions they felt from their teachers. The expectation of their smartness translated into them actually becoming smarter. So how can we implement Husn Dhan in our daily life?
Well, the first step is to recognize it for what it is. Recognize it. Remember, we often do not know the intentions or motivations of people around us, and what we think, say, or do can have a powerful impact. Keep a reflection journal. Every day, take the time to reflect on the interactions you had. Write down one instance in which you jumped to conclusions. Interact empathetically. You can interact empathetically by asking yourself if you would want others to make assumptions about you in similar situations. Commit to being positive. Make a commitment to think positive and offer everyone the benefit of the doubt.
Soon, you'll be catching yourself before you assume and flipping your perception to the positive automatically.